Okay, it is 1 minute after 4, so in the interest of our hour, we'll go ahead and get started. You are joining the beginning of year principals webinar today for 2021-2022. I have pasted a link to our slides if you'd like to get a copy of those in the chat, and we'll do that off and on as folks join. So we'd like to welcome you today. Let me go to the next slide. We are in a WebEx meeting today, so just a little bit of housekeeping rules for today. We will take questions through the chat for the most part. Everybody can see the chat. So if you have questions that are good for the group, please put those in the chat, and we will pause as we need to answer those. And any that we can't answer, we will research and put in our frequently asked questions document on the follow-up email within a week after the webinar. If you have maybe some private questions for our panelists, that's myself and Dr. Socks, you can enter those via the QA panel. You can find that under the 3 dots. Also, anybody having any audio issues, there's the 3 dots, and you may, depending on how you join us, see some different controls. So look for your switch audio if you're having audio issues. Up here are just some different versions of the controls that you might see. We ask that you stay muted unless you're sharing. You're welcome to unmute to ask your question. You're welcome to put your question in the chat. We will not be doing cameras today. I did want to have mine on just to say hi, but I will be turning it off. I am still working from home, and my bandwidth isn't always great when I have video on. So just be aware of your surroundings. You do not need to have your video on today. And then, of course, we did talk about the chat. If you have any questions or ideas, please put those in the chat. Down in the bottom bar, if you like to have those closed captions, those are enabled in our meeting. You just need to click the little robot guy to turn those on, to toggle those on or off. If you need any help with WebEx, there's a guide linked at the bottom of this slide. So I have a question. How do I change my name? I have not gotten that question before. So I see you've called in by phone. I don't know if there's an option to change your name unless it's listed in that guide. So I will research that for the next time we have a webinar if somebody wants to change their name. If you want to list it here, maybe we can keep up and remember, so when you do raise that hand, we know who you are. Okay, I am Cammie Nairn. I do work for NCDPI in the Digital Teaching and Learning Division for our home-based products. And I manage the NCEES, the North Carolina Educator Effectiveness System, for you guys, and help you guys with any questions you have with the system processes in NCEES. And joining me today is Dr. Robert Socks. He is awesome, and he can answer all your policy questions. And I'm going to pause for a minute and let Dr. Socks say hello.
Yeah, thanks, Cammie. I also want to double check and make sure my mic is working. Am I loud enough? I'm not too loud, am I?
That sounds good to me.
Okay, excellent. Very good. Well, I'm glad to be here. Cammie and I enjoy partnering so that we can try to, within these webinars, cover both sides of the process. The technical side, where to click the buttons, because that's Cammie's expertise. And then the policy side, what are those things that are expected of statute and policy in North Carolina? And that's where my knowledge base comes in to support you as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Robert. So for our agenda today, we're going to try to go through a lot within this hour. We're going to just do a quick review of how you access NCEES, and then review the principal's view of the teacher evaluation process. We're going to talk about confirming your staff list and setting those plan types. We're going to review how to assign access rights a little bit, and then we're going to also jump into your principal evaluation process and how to begin that principal evaluation. So how to access NCEES. Everybody in North Carolina, the only way you get to NCEES is to log in through our single sign-on system, and it does have a few names. You'll see them here, Rapid Identity. Most folks call it either NCED Cloud or IAM. So that's where you're going to land. It's my.ncedcloud.org. If you're in a PSU, a public school unit, or districts, you are going to leave the top drop down on NCEES Cloud and then enter your 10-digit UID. However, if you are a brand new staff, you have never ever logged into this single sign-on system, you would actually claim your account, and your district would have be able to tell you how to do that. Once you've claimed your account, of course, you're going to log in with your username, and then it's going to take you to the next page when you click go, and you're going to enter your 10-digit UID password that you set up. Now, if I have DPI staff listening, that first drop down where it says NCEES Cloud, you're going to change that to NCDPI, and you're going to enter your NCID and the password that goes with your NCID. Once you're in there, it's going to open up a dashboard. So in your dashboard, you'll see several icons of products that you will have access to. One of those is going to be NCEES, and it looks like the blue Power School, the cyan blue letter P. Underneath it is Unified Talent. That's our umbrella company with Power School. And underneath that is NCEES, what we call it, NCEES. So you're going to click that to get into NCEES. This is a quick look of, if you're a principal, what your landing page could look like. So depending on your access rights, it depends on how many of these little links you have in the black bar up here. Most principals will see most of these links. So let's start on the left. When you come in, you're going to land on your home page. You're going to see a welcome area, and right now we've got news in there about the new guides that are posted, the new things that have happened over the summer. That will be posted in the welcome channel. And on the right, we'll be updating this soon. Currently, you're going to see last year's webinars, which are still good webinars to go view, but we'll be updating that shortly to show our current year webinars. And down below is some other boxes for if you're a district administrator in NCEES, a NCEES assigned district administrator, you have your own channel as well with news that I give our district administrators. Anything that's put on the calendar in NCEES shows in the upcoming events area. And I think that's pretty much all that's down there. If you're teaching a course, you might have a channel down there for the instructor courses. But so if we look across, principals are going to see my evaluation, staff evaluations, help guides, professional development, my courses. And then if you transfer credit manager, everybody sees that. That's where you enter outside credits for credit. That's a whole nother webinar. The mobile app kind of goes along with our PD, professional development. It's an attendance taking app for professional development in NCEES. System administration. This is usually the district administrators see system administration. You see it too to get to a few items. And my staff, this is where we're going to go look at those staff rosters. And then all site administrators, those head principals, not necessarily assistant principals, anybody that has the site administrator role will see reporting as well. At the very top right, you're going to see an envelope, and that's where I send out messages, or you can send out messages to your staff. Use that for sending out those email messages or just messages within NCEES. The calendar icon, if you want to utilize the calendar in NCEES, you can do that here. I do post our webinars on this calendar here, so you can always go check that calendar to see when the next webinar is. And then this question mark in the circle is our vendor, Power Schools Help. We do give you help guides for North Carolina, so if you want detailed help guides, check the help guides tab. If you just want generic help, or you want to look something up from the vendor, it's under the question mark. And then under your initials is where you can log out or look at your profile information. Okay, so let's take a quick look at the Help Guides tab. Do go out here, especially as your staff, if you're new to walking your staff through the evaluation process. We have guides for each plan type, and I know the letters are a little small on here, but here's comprehensive. We have a teacher guide for comprehensive, an evaluator guide for comprehensive, and a peer observer guide for comprehensive. The peer observer guide can be used for all plans, but the peer is required for comprehensive, so that's why it's placed under this section. There's standard, abbreviated, late hire, the PDP, that professional development plan, and then the principal evaluation plan as well. If you are a district or site administrator, we have additional guides over here. We're going to take a look at a couple of those in a few minutes. All right, so since we don't have any questions, let me post our link to our slides one more time. I see a few more folks have joined us. Thank you guys for joining us this evening. And we will give you a link to our slides in the chat, and we'll move on with our presentation. So the teacher evaluation process is all about growth and improvement. The intended purpose of the North Carolina teacher evaluation process is to assess the teacher's performance in relation to the North Carolina professional teaching standards and to design a plan for professional growth. And Dr. Sachs will be speaking more about this in the coming slides. I did want to give you a quick overview of a few new things in NCEES. If you've been an evaluator and you've been working on those observations, occasionally you run into an observation and you would look for the status icon and it would never turn green. And we found out it's because you are working in an optional observation. So maybe the peer on the standard plan or the abbreviated plan, or maybe you've done an additional observation. Those will never show green at the very top. So I won't go through all of this. We do have a webinar that walked through all these little arrows here. But I wanted to let you know, if you look at the top left, on a required observation, you see the little circle and it turns blue when it goes in progress. But now on our optional observations, you will no longer see that circle up there. To know if this is done, you're going to look for, have I completed the main observation? Here it's the formal observation peer. Are both signatures, do they both have their green checks? And then I, as the evaluator, have I locked it? As long as those 4 pieces are in place, that is complete. Do we have any questions about that? The second place we updated was when your teacher submitted a written response. You as the evaluator would get, or observer I think, would get an email that says your teacher has submitted a written response, please acknowledge it. And so we updated this because we were getting people that would acknowledge it, but they would never say, yes, I did look at this. They were were able to check it and close it. And you really needed to answer the question, have you seen the written response from the teacher? So now when you go in here, you have that choice to say yes, or you can back out and it will just stay not in progress or just in progress. Once you say yes, then the blue little circle will then get the green check. The other area I wanted you to be aware of is tell your observers and you guys as well. We want to get a little bit more consistency in the times entered when you open an observation. So when you open an observation, it always asks you, well, what is the length of time of this observation? And that's going to determine whether it's a formal observation or an informal observation for that length of time. So you need to enter your start time and your end time. And we're asking you to please enter that in an hour, minute, and then AM or PM format. So hour, minute, AM or PM. This is going to help your administrators that have to run reports and figure out how the number of minutes been met. So please enter your times in that format. All right, beginning of year orientation. Here's our NCEES Google site. This has links to your beginning of year orientation that Dr. Kim Simmons set up this site and added these links for you guys that you can use this for your orientation. So check it out, NCEES Information and Resources site. You're going to click, there's 3 little lines when you go to that site. You're going to click to open it, and then you're going to click on beginning of year orientation. And what's going to be on there? You're going to have resources for orientation. You're going to find that this listing that you should have a face-to-face or virtual orientation meeting to discuss questions with your staff so that you can clarify anything that they have regarding NCEES, any questions they have regarding NCEES. There is a webinar out there that you and your staff can watch together, or you can assign out if you're still like virtual to let them watch. It's a very good orientation recorded webinar. And then prior to your orientation, you as principals should be sending a reminder regarding the orientation meeting when it's going to be held if you're having like a little face-to-face or virtual meeting, and provide a link to the NCEES Google site where all this evaluation information and resources are housed. You as principals in the top corner, you should be providing the rubric for evaluating North Carolina teachers, the state board policy Eval 004, and a calendar schedule for completing all the components in the process. I have included links on this slide here as well. Your district determines your calendar schedule. To help you with that calendar schedule, here's just a quick look of what needs to be done in each plan type. So to open up the summary evaluation, the comprehensive plan must have an observation 1, 2, 3, and appear completed before that summary evaluation will open. So make sure you have all those time to get in all those observations. The standard plan has observation 1, 2, and 3. You could add appear as optional, but these are the 3 required to open the summary evaluation. The abbreviated plan for teachers, you're going to complete observations 1 and 2. And the late hire just needs 1. And again, you can add any additional observations that you need. We are recommending this year a due date to be completed with your plans, and that means all your evaluation activities must be locked and completed and locked, and your professional development plans, beginning, middle, and end of year, all of those areas must be completed as well. That due date is June 20th, 2022 by the close of business day. That's 10 days before the end of the school year. This will also give you time to work with your NCEES district administrators to run the end of year reports prior to June 29th. We always ask that our districts run those end of year reports during the current school year after you've completed everything, because data does change once we click into the new school year. Any questions about that due date? The teacher evaluation process steps. Okay, I'll turn this over to Dr. Sachs.
Thanks, Cami. So what you see on the screen here is a picture of the, it's an infographic about the process cycle. We're going to be talking about a little more in depth here in just a moment, but just as a point of information, 2 years ago in the 1920 school year, you know that our NCEES processes were suspended when COVID shut schools down, and we scrambled to figure out how we were going to operate. Last year, during the 2021 school year, we operated with NCEES. We supported principals in figuring out how to do that in a hybrid environment. And this is just to share with you that we anticipate we'll be utilizing NCEES as expected in this school year, even though we know that we're still challenged by some of the things that the virus is bringing forward. But we just want you to know that we plan on using NCEES as it is designed, and we will be supporting you through these webinars throughout the year to assist you as well as teachers to understand the process and follow those components appropriately. Next slide, Cami. So that infographic is on page 21 of the manual, and the manual is on the NCEES Google site that Cami shared a moment ago. And today we're going to be looking at the first 3 components. The green component, we're going to talk a little bit about training and orientation. We're going to then shift to the purple component in the upper right-hand corner and talk a little bit about the self-assessing and the goal setting and the pre-conference components of the work. And then finally today, the last thing we'll talk about in this infographic is the pink part, which is to talk about that observation cycle. Step 4, or part 4, which is the blue component, really addresses the things that happen at the end when things are getting buttoned up for evaluation processes. And we actually have a webinar later in the year where we will address that bottom left quadrant of this graphic. So next slide, Cami. So in step one actually contains two components. And the first component is training. And training is what a teacher who is brand new to the evaluation process would need to receive. So any teacher that is new to your building or new to North Carolina needs to be trained. And it's really important that everybody involved with this, whether they're principals, teachers, peer evaluators, everybody needs to be trained in their first year of use of these NCEES tools. And again, the NCEES Google site has lots of resources to support you with helping get this training put together and supporting individuals with understanding the evaluation requirements. So we also have recordings of webinars from the past that you also might find helpful. Cami, if you'll click the next slide. So also in step one is orientation. Once everybody has had that very first training annually, the expectation is that each year at the beginning of the year, everyone is reminded of the evaluation process, and that's called the orientation. And during the orientation, it is really important that teachers get 3 specific things to support their work. They need a copy of the rubric so they know what those standards are that they're being evaluated by. They need to have a copy of or a way to get to the policy that indicates that this is required, and that policy, the name of that policy is EVAL 004. And it's important for you to provide the schedule for completing your evaluation processes. And Cami mentioned earlier that schedules are derived locally. Your district determines what your schedule is. DPI doesn't tell you that the first observation has to happen in the first quarter and the second observation in the second quarter, although the earlier they can start, the better. But your districts often have particular processes and schedules that you follow. So you'll want to make sure that in orientation that you include the rubric, the policy, so people understand why this is required, and then they should have a sense of the time frame and the format of what they will expect throughout the year in terms of observations and when the evaluation process will be concluded. Next slide, Kimmy. So in this purple component, you see the step 2 of the process in the upper right-hand corner. And step 2 is made up of components 3 and component 4. So you'll be using the rubric for evaluating teachers. And the rubric is used in multiple places. And this is the first place that anyone interacts with it, and this is the teacher interacting with the rubric to do a self-assessment. And they're rating their own beliefs about their performance and their skills, and they're marking those on the rubric so that they can complete the self-assessment of where they think their skills are at the beginning of the year. Now, the self-assessment remains open. If a teacher feels like in the middle of the year or later in the year, their skills at doing things have changed, they certainly can go back and modify this self-assessment. It's considered to be an open and a living document. The teacher's self-assessment is their own to do. So the teacher should be thinking about their own thoughts on their beliefs about their performance and their skills and mark that. The idea of the self-assessment is that it should help guide the teacher's goal setting and their professional development design and help provide input for the final rating. So at the end of the year, when you're talking to the teacher about their performance throughout the year, you would also want to talk a little bit about the teacher's self-assessment and their thoughts on how they had progressed throughout the year. And again, I mentioned it can be kept open so that it can be adjusted throughout the year so teachers can keep that list of their skills up to date. Now, the self-assessment belongs to the teacher. If the teacher wants to share it with their evaluator, there is a button they can push and it will make it visible to the evaluator, but they are not obligated to do so. The teacher can keep their self-assessment as their own private document. And that self-assessment helps to get a sense of where the teacher's skills and abilities are, and it's also a place that they can record those over time. In addition to the self-assessment in step 2, component 4, the pre-observation conference, is also a part of this step. And in the pre-observation conference, the purpose of this is to prepare the principal for the first formal observation. So before that first formal observation, the principal and the teacher will meet and they need to discuss three things. The first thing is talk a little bit about the self-assessment. Even if the teacher didn't share it with the principal so they can open it and view it, it should be a part of that conversation as the teacher says and identifies the things they feel like they're good at and the things that they want to improve upon. It's also important to talk a little bit about the professional growth plan and to provide a written description of what the lesson is and the activities that will be a part of that first observation for that first formal observation. So let's talk a little bit more about professional development or professional growth plans. In this next slide, you see that there are three types of professional development plans, and these three types are based on the level of interaction that the teacher and the administrator has on those plans. So an individual PDP is appropriate for new teachers and any teachers who are proficient in all of the standards on the teacher's summary rating form. An individual PDP, all of the goals are controlled by the teacher. The teacher sets those individual goals and they meet with the administrator at 3 points throughout the year to discuss it. At the beginning of the year when they build it, at the middle of the year when they check in, and at the end of the year when they follow up and wrap up and talk about the conclusion of the PDP and discuss a little bit about what things might need to be in next year's PDP. A monitored PDP is intended for teachers who need a little bit of support. And you might think of this as teachers who rated developing on one or more of their standards on the summary rating form in the previous year. And because this teacher needs a little bit more support, the administrator and the teacher are going to be partners in designing this. So unlike the individual where the teacher decides what the priorities are, in a monitored, the principal has some input on what those goals need to be. And again, they should meet at least 3 times to support this monitored PDP. At the beginning of the year to establish the goals, at the mid-year to check in on progress, and then at the end of the year. Any PDP other than an individual would certainly benefit from additional meetings in between the beginning, mid-year, and end-of-year meetings, just to make sure that the teacher remains on track and the trajectory of the PDP is being met. The directed PDP is the most structured professional development plan, and directed PDPs are intended for teachers who need a significant amount of help. And you might think of these as teachers who on one or more standards were identified as not demonstrated, or if they're developing on multiple standards in their summary rating form. Now, in a directed PDP, again, it's the highest level of support. In a directed PDP, it is the administrator that identifies the goals for the teacher, and those goals are based on observations and historical information. The administrator knows what those specific things are that the teacher needs to be working on and to address. And again, the minimum requirements for a directed PDP are to meet at the beginning of the year to make sure the teacher understands the expectations, at the middle of the year to check progress, and then finally at the end of the year to assess the progress and discuss next steps. And again, intermediate check-ins in between the beginning, middle, and end of the year would be incredibly beneficial for teachers on either a monitored or a directed plan. Next slide, Cami. So as we think about that beginning discussion for that pre-observation conference, it's really important for the principal, the evaluator, the observer, to have an understanding of what it is they're getting ready to see. Because being oriented and aware, then the principal can be more mindful of what they want to be looking for, and the teacher can identify the things that they want to showcase in terms of their teaching. So providing a written description of the lesson that is going to be observed is a really important discussion topic for the pre-observation conference. It's also helpful if the teacher is able to share with the principal the culture of the class, what to expect in terms of how the students will interact with each other. Make sure that the principal has a strong sense of what kinds of patterns and behaviors they're likely to see when they come in to observe the instruction that's happening in that, in that first formal observation. It's also helpful if the teacher is proactive in planning the lessons to ensure student success. If there are points of differentiation or things the teacher intends to do to help meet the needs of all students, highlighting those for the principal in the pre-observation conference will help ensure that the principal sees those efforts to differentiate. Sometimes principals might offer questions to answer for the teacher in the pre-observation conference, and they may provide an outline for that discussion. Sometimes principals want to be very specific to find out from the teacher what are the things the teacher would like for the principal to look at very closely. What are the things the teacher is working on that the principal might need to watch for to provide particularly pointed feedback. So if the principal or the evaluator is interested in asking those kinds of questions to get the teacher to really think strategically about that first lesson, the first formal observation, this in the pre-observation conference is an opportunity to do that. Providing the lesson plan directly, the actual printed lesson plan in lesson plan format, is certainly an option, but anything just to help the principal be aware of what they're going to be watching. The pre-observation conference, really the driver of the pre-observation conference really needs to be the teacher. It's about the teacher being proactive in helping the principal know what it is to expect and what they should be looking for to support the teacher when they come to observe that very first formal instructional opportunity for this formal observation. Next slide, Cami. So once the pre-observation conference has happened, then the next thing that comes along is the actual visit to the classroom. And so the components 5 and 6 talk about the visit to the classroom and the follow-up that goes with that. And it's step 3 of the 4-step cycle that the infographic shares. So the observation cycle includes the observation and the post-observation conference. So in component 5, the observation, this is when the evaluator is watching the instruction and marking descriptors on the rubric as they watch the lesson. There are 2 types of observations. There are formal observations and informal observation. A formal observation always includes a pre-observation conference, and a formal observation has to be a duration of at least 45 minutes or an entire class period. An informal observation is an observation that must last at least 20 minutes. Post-conferences are not required, but can be requested by a teacher for informal observations. The informal observation is most prominent in the abbreviated evaluation cycle. Teachers with less than 3 years of employment are on a comprehensive evaluation cycle. A comprehensive evaluation cycle, all 3 observations are formal observations. And then there is 1 formal observation from a peer in the comprehensive cycle. And this is, the requirements for this are established in statute in North Carolina. Teachers with more than 3 years of employment can be on a standard or an abbreviated cycle, and your district can determine what your procedures are for deciding whether or not they should be on a standard or abbreviated. The standard cycle requires 3 observations, and it looks at all of the standards. 1 of those observations must be formal. The abbreviated cycle includes 2 observations. Those 2 observations are on a portion of the rubric, standards 1 and 4. And in the abbreviated cycle, observations may be formal or informal, and the principal and the teacher should discuss their preference for whether those abbreviated cycle observations are formal or informal, so that the teacher knows at the beginning of the year what the expectation is for those. The next slide shows a chart. This chart shows you a visual indicator of the components that are required for each of those. And so you see the way the chart is set up, that for a comprehensive evaluation, the greatest number of steps are required, and it uses the whole rubric. In a standard observation, a large number of steps are required, but not the greatest number of steps, and it uses the whole rubric. In the abbreviated cycle, there are less steps required, and it uses less of the rubric, only standards 1 and 4. Next slide, Cami. So as we think about observations, observations really are a series of formative assessments. The purpose of the observation is to provide formative support to a teacher. As you go in and you visit, you check the boxes in the rubric for those things that you see, you carry that information forward, you do another observation by the end of the year. In most cases, you've collected 2 or 3 observation rubrics, and at the end of the year, you assess all of that collected data to make a final decision about the ratings of the teacher overall. There are some misconceptions about observations. Teachers will often refer to an observation as an evaluation. Observations are not evaluations. In North Carolina, in our teacher evaluation process, you are not evaluated until the end of the year. And it is actually impossible to evaluate a teacher without at least 2 observations. Our procedures for determining ratings requires a minimum of 2 classroom visits to establish ratings. So just remember, an observation is one collection of data that gets carried forward and used at the end of the year to create the evaluation or the summary ratings of each of the 5 standards. Next slide, Cami. So in terms of those observations, after the formal observation and the visit to the classroom has occurred, there is a post-observation conference that needs to occur to discuss the lesson and debrief and to process what the principal observed. And this is an opportunity also for the teacher to talk a little bit about the things that they felt went well with the lesson and things they might do differently. Now, the whole idea of a post-observation conference is to support the formative nature of the observation process. And a pre-observation conference that's done way long time after an observation is not particularly helpful. The closer the post-observation conference is to the actual observation, the more beneficial the information will be. So for that reason, we have in policy that it is required that the post-observation conference needs to occur no later than 10 days after each formal observation. So within 10 days, it's really important to have a follow-up to do the post-observation conference. If it's more than 10 days, the information you want to provide is really too old at that point, and it's not particularly helpful. So as we think about this, let's remember that the purpose of the evaluation process is to support growth and improvement over the year. So the post-observation conference really is the heart of what is necessary to accomplish this, because it's in that post-observation conference that the principal and the teacher are able to talk about the evidences gathered during the observation, so the principal can help the teacher understand what they did extremely well, and the teacher can think about what those things are that they may want to adjust, modify, or improve in the future. It's really important to use the language of the rubric to ensure an accurate interpretation of the standards. The post-observation conference is really a crucial part of the evaluation process. This meeting between the teacher and the observer provides an opportunity for strengthened communication and can result in a plan for continued improvement for the teacher and their practice. During each post-observation conference, the principal and the teacher should discuss and document on the rubric the strengths and weaknesses of the teacher's performance during the observed lesson. It's very possible that during a post-observation conference, a principal will discover there were boxes on the rubric they did not check while they were watching teaching, but upon discussing with the teacher, they recognize it is appropriate to mark those boxes on the rubric because the follow-up conversation with the teacher confirms that that level of understanding or that level of action was in place during that lesson. The post-observation conference should not include discussions of the ratings. Next slide, Cami. The rubric is structured moving from left to right so that the things in the first column address knowledge. The things in the second column, the proficient column, address action. The third column addresses interaction, and the fourth column addresses extension. Sometimes when teachers inquire about their observations, I'll hear them say things like, "My first observation was all developing." Well, that's not particularly helpful in a post-observation conference. So recognizing that that first column is all about knowledge, it would be much more helpful for a teacher to hear from their principal, when I observed your class, I was able to confirm that you know the things you need to know in order to teach your children, but I did not see direct action that you were doing those things. So as a result, on this first observation rubric, I've checked lots of boxes in the first column because I know you know this stuff. But I was unable to check very many boxes in the action column because I don't see you doing the things that I know that you know how to do. And because I don't see you doing those things, I'm not able to see the students' responses to your instruction. There is no interaction on the part of the learners. And so using those words, knowledge, action, interaction, and extension, can be much more productive in a post-conference discussion, and they can provide a great deal more guidance to teachers as they think about what it is they need to improve or do differently the next time the principal comes to visit.
Okay, thank you, Robert. Does anybody have any questions before we move on? I haven't seen any in the chat. If you think of any questions, please just pop those in the chat for us. All right, so it is booking on the time here. We got about 20 minutes. Let's do the confirming your staff lists and plan types. We will probably stay in the slides in interest of time, but if there's anything you want to see, pop that in the chat. I do have the system up so we can pop to the live side if we need to. So we're going to take a look at the My Staff tab. And My Staff is where you're going to see your staff rosters. On the left is our newly updated My Staff signing plan types guide. So it is linked there. It is newly posted on the home page as well in NCEES. So when we're looking on the My Staff tab, you're going to land on the staff details page. I did want to show you this because it is fairly new since last year. Used to you'd land on a page that didn't have any filters or anything on it, and now it will. So we're going to take a look at that in just a minute. But on the staff rosters page is going to be a list of all your staff and the area where you're going to set those teacher plan types and the PDP types. We're also going to take a look at all staff, where you can go check to see if your staff have started their plans. Do remember that once you set these plan types, they should be set at the same time. So if you're setting a teacher's plan right here, you should also set the PDP type at the same time. That way both will get the teacher rubric. Now, it's more important probably on your counselors, your library media specialists, to set these at the same time, because the system will default to a teacher rubric unless you've set these at the same time. So if you selected the counselor plan, maybe a standard counselor plan, and you set the individual PDP type, then it feeds off each other, and it knows to put the counselor rubric in the self-assessment in the PDP and the counselor rubric in the evaluation observations and summary evaluation. Any questions about the timing of setting those plan types? So here's just a closer look at the drop downs for the teacher plan types. Once you select them, they do process overnight. These are all your plan types. The only one that has an abbreviated plan type is your teacher rubric. So the teacher abbreviated is right there. All other plan types have comprehensive, standard, and late hire for your instructional staff, and that's your teachers, your counselors, your social workers, and so on. You also have the ability to set your principal plan types. However, the system is designed to go ahead and assign principals their plans. So you should already see the principal plan set under teacher plan types. The only reason you wouldn't is that staff did not come into NCEES with a principal budget code. So some of our charters see this because their principals are under a director budget code. And so then we have to do a little work in the background to make sure they can see a principal plan, if that's what actually they are, is a principal. And over here on the right, PDP types, we do have a new setting under PDP types, and that's no PDP. We thought this would be good for reporting purposes and also help you as you go through the list. Some staff are not going to get a PDP, especially your principals do not get a PDP plan. Their goals are set in their evaluation plan. Teachers' goals are set in their PDP plan. So you do need to set those for your instructional staff. And then your principals should have the no PDP set there. That's going to help you when you look through your list to know that, oh, I've already checked that person. I've done all the settings for the plan types. So here's a look at the All Staff tab. I do want to pop over to the live side just a minute. Let me see if I can get that opened up real quick. Okay, so I hope he's still logged in. Here I have a principal, and we've gone to My Staff. Just click on that so you can see that we are there. Oh, and he is not in there, so let me go do that again. Sorry, give me just a second and I'll get him right back. Okay. All right. Now we have our principal, and we're going to click on My Staff. This principal can now see a list of the staff at their location. If they had access to more than one location, they could select the other location up here. So if you have a principal working at two schools and they have access in NCEES, they're going to see it here. They'll have to switch it. On this staff details page is now a place to add a filter. So maybe I didn't want to see any of my administrative staff today. I could add a filter. And I don't want to see my administrative staff today. And it will hold throughout the day. And I don't know if it holds overnight. And now I'm only working with my instructional staff. And all staff come in as instructional or administrative currently. Even your counselors and all of those are considered instructional. They fall under the definition of teacher. So that's how to filter your page. This is where you're going to set those plan types. This is the Pdp types. Over here on the left is where you can look at profiles. Profiles are going to give principal additional information about their staff. Principals should not be able to edit this page. If you are a district assigned NCEES district administrator, if you're assigned those rights, you can edit some of the fields in here. Any schools, if they're showing two schools, check that out and get with the previous district if these are two different districts, because we do not want two different districts showing here, because then both district names are going to show on the plan. The one that's in bold is going to be the primary location. Okay, that's how to use your filters. And then how do I know once I've set these plan types, they've processed overnight, I've told my staff to start their plans. How do I know if they've started them? You can come over here to all staff. And there's a drop down here. Now remember, you're only going to see the drop down when you have access to that person. So here, if you see the word edit and then the title of the plan type, that means this person has started their plan. So you can just go through the list. If you ever see the word start in this list, the person has not started their plan. And you know what happens when they don't start their plan? You come over here to staff evaluations, and you're not going to see their name in this list. So that's the reason why you don't see some people's names in this list, because they have not started their plans. And we do have a little note up here to remember to check that. If you don't see somebody here on the staff evaluations page dashboard, then they have not started their plan. And I did put a screenshot at the top of that page to show you what we just looked at. There's that word start. So this abbreviated plan is not going to show up on that staff evaluations page. Any questions about how to verify that? Oh, I lost my screen. Let's try to get it back. There we go. All right, assigning staff access rights. We are not going to go deep into this. I did do a webinar for admin start of year refresher. What's new in NCEES? That was held on Tuesday, August 3rd. Here's your recording. We did a deep dive into a lot of the setting of the access rights. So if you need more details on that, please go watch that recording. There's a link to the presentation. We did have a couple questions that we've answered for staff. Just real quickly, again, remember that principals who are on budget code 114 automatically get their plans assigned. And principals with budget code 114 also get evaluator rights assigned. They're the only group that comes into NCEES with already assigned access rights. They get to be an evaluator for everybody in their location, even the AP principal plans. So here's some of the rights that you can assign access to. Evaluators, observers, anyone who needs to complete that observation for a teacher through the school year. Peer observer. These two do not mix up. You can give somebody an observer. They can get into the plan and think that they are going to be the peer observer, but they cannot sign off on the plan. Why? Because they don't have the role for the peer observer or the access right of a peer observer. So make sure your peer observers get this setting, peer observer. You can give people view-only access. Maybe you have a superintendent that just needs to view plans. You can set those. Reopen. Your assigned district administrators, they have reopened. They're the ones you go to when you've locked an activity, but something needs to be fixed. You notify everybody. You notify the district administrator. The district administrator goes and unlocks and reopens the activity so that the principal and the teacher can fix what needs to be fixed, and then they can reclose it, but it is the district administrator that must reopen it. Now, you can give others reopen rights, but be careful about who you assign those to. And then finally, the mentor is the person who mentors teachers. That is assigned on the PDP plans. Your plans must be assigned and processed overnight for you to be able to view the plans when you're assigning access rights. If you don't see any plans in the admin rights window, you've not finished assigning plans or they have not processed overnight yet. So here's a look at staff evaluations page that we just looked at just a minute ago. Just a quick overview because I know we need to get into the principal plan as well. So this is a quick overview, and you can review this slide later, but there's several things you can do on this page. Number one, let's start on the top right in the yellow. Whoever is on this list, you can download a CSV of the list that is showing on the page. There is a graph icon for additional reports. The evaluation completion report is the one that is used most often by districts. It is also a good report because it shows an overall status on the plans. So if you were to go in and run an evaluation completion report on your comprehensive plans, you can also see there who has started and not started their plan by looking at that overall status. And then we also have filters on this page, so you can filter. Maybe I only want to see the comprehensive plans on today, so I can add a filter to only view the active plan that's comprehensive. There's a handy little pin above people's names. This was put here during ASW days. We no longer have the ASW going on, so the pins remain, but it allows you to click, and maybe you want to work with your beginning teachers. So you can go pin all your beginning teachers, come over here and say, show my list. And now your list is stuck on only the ones you've pinned, only those beginning teachers. So you can work with those, and it does stick day to day until you click back up here and say, show me my full list again. Let's see, what else have we got? We've got the little squares. You can check those, and down at the bottom of the page is a way to message people from this page. So if you want to message people that, hey, this activity is due today or due by Friday, you can check the boxes, or you can leave everybody unchecked and message everybody that due date. We're going to move on for time's sake. On the dash, let's go back. The main thing you use this page for is to go across here, and wherever there's a flower icon, that is where you look to see, is that activity in progress? Is it complete? Is it complete and locked? So this is where these icons are going to show up. Not started, in progress, incomplete, complete. And now we also have a complete with a little lock on it that tells you when that whole activity has been fully completed and locked. Any questions about that? Was a quick run through the system. All right, so let's get into the principal evaluation process. Robert, we only have about 5 minutes.
Okay, well, I don't think this will take too long. Just like we
Okay.
had for the teacher evaluation process, there is a one-pager just to see it all as one quick snapshot. And Cammie's going to click through the slides. This is available on the NCEES website. We're going to click through these slides. I just want to talk a little bit about each step. In the upper right-hand corner, you'll notice a color-coded red, green, black. Red are documents that are required. Green are forms that are available, that are optional, and things that are printed in black are required processes. So the first step, just like the teacher, is orientation, and your process is meet to distribute materials outlining the evaluation process. Next slide. When you look at step 2, you'll notice that within step 2, there is a required document, the self-assessment. The performance goals are a required process to establish those goals, and there is an optional form that you may use that is recommended but not required. And then step 3 is the initial meeting, and you'll notice that this initial meeting is all required processes, but there aren't necessarily any forms required or optional that come from this work. This is about the principal and their evaluator meeting to talk about the process. Next slide. Then step 4 is about the data collection. What is the observer going to be looking for, and what is the principal going to be collecting as they think about their work throughout the year? And there is an optional form to help support this work in step 4. Next slide. Step 5 is a check-in in the middle of the year to talk about the progress. Where have you been? How are things going? Where do you need to go? And you'll notice step 5 is really all about required processes with an optional form to help guide that mid-year check-in process. Next slide, Cammie. Step 6 is the work that occurs at the end of the year as the principal prepares a consolidated performance assessment where they pull all of the evidences and the pieces together to document the work that they did throughout the year. And again, there is a green optional form to help the principal to do that in an organized fashion and help to get those things together in a logical sequence. And then finally, next slide. That step 7 brings all of that together in the summary rating process, which, as you can see here, is made up of required process steps. And there are 2 required documents: the self-assessment that is done at the beginning of the year and referred to again at the end, and then finally the summary evaluation form, and the rubric that gets used to provide those summary ratings is required. So the steps for the principal process are quite linear, and they're outlined in this. And again, the color coding helps you keep track of what's required, where there are optional support forms, and what the specific processes are that policy requires. Thank you, Cammie.
Thank you, Robert. All right, so real quick, here are 2 updated guides. You can find those in NCEES as well, but they're linked in on your slides. Here's the self-assessment that principals do, and now you no longer have to mark it complete. That's new this year. Once you finalize, it's done. Here's the area to enter your goals. There was a box in here where you entered your district. That is no longer a requirement. You do have to click in there, go view the manual and policy, and then save and exit. And then notes and artifacts, we had issues where the notes weren't always showing. Principals, you only see artifacts and notes. If you're the evaluator, you see artifacts and notes and evaluator notes. Evaluator notes are only for the evaluator. And of course, there's the rubric that must be done. We've also enabled emails to go out when principal activities are complete in the plan. And here's just a quick look. The screenshots aren't updated, but they're the same. You're going to click in here to open your plan. You're going to do the orientation. Just follow all those steps for orientation. When it's complete, you're going to get a green check. You're going to complete steps 2 through 4, which is complete the pre-evaluation planning steps, self-assessment, setting your goals, have that initial meeting with the evaluator, and then begin that data collection where you can come in here and post your artifacts and notes. Oh, we're at the end. So let me copy this link. Did anybody have any questions they wanted answered today? While we have a minute left. I'm posting a link in the chat right now. We do appreciate your feedback on our webinars that we do for you. Did you receive the training you expected to receive today? And then also, especially if you're keeping up with credits, once you complete that form, you can opt on the last question to turn in your name and email address, and it will send you a certificate for today for 0.1 CEU. You must turn that in for approval at your local district. The last few slides I'll let you go through. There are some courses out there for principals. Do go out to professional development and do a search for principal or for administrator, and you're going to find these courses where you can earn some additional credits. Once you've signed up for them, they're going to show on your My Courses page in the My Courses channel. Here are our upcoming webinars. We've just completed the beginning of year for principals. Next week, if you have new people and they're in session, please have them join us for New User Basics. And then the following week, we're going to do the beginning of year for teachers and support staff. And then on September 7th, Robert is going to hold the Understanding Your Teacher rubric, talking all about the observations and going through the rubric throughout the year. Here is a list of your contacts. In the middle are your NCDPI contacts. Kim Simmons has retired, so we will be posting a job for that position soon. Watch for that if you're interested. Just watch for that job posting. We're going to miss Kim. She was awesome. So thank you, Robert, for filling in for her today. And again, if you have issues, please open a ServiceNow ticket with our support desk. All right. I think that's all I have. So I'll come back up here for our upcoming webinars. Please, I'll remind you to please join us for those. Thank you, guys. We didn't have a lot of questions today, so I hope we did present what you wanted to see today. If you think of anything later, please do email Robert or I, and we will be happy to get that with you. I'm going to end the recording, but I'll stay online for another minute in case you have questions you want to do after the recording ends.